Now, last month, Army suicides hit a record since the Army began releasing those figures in 2009. 32 potential suicides were recorded. 22 were active duty soldiers and 10 were reservists. And that means that there was, on average, more than one suicide a day last month. Now, in just the first 7 months of this year, that brings the number of Army suicides up to 160. It's a statistic that's never easy to discuss, but it's one that speaks volumes. And the Army, for now, is calling them potential suicides because they say that investigations are underway in most of the deaths to confirm the exact case. But at least in one of these cases, those closest to the soldiers say that it's undeniable. Take, for example, Staff Sgt. Hagemann. He had orders to return to Afghanistan this month for a 9th tour of duty. But his body was found a few weeks ago at Joint Base Lewis McChord. And his wife said that he shot himself in the head, that he wanted out of the military, and the Rangers never took his pleas for help seriously. Now, the Army's launched a major effort over the last several years to institute new training for soldiers to be able to bounce back from stress, to change the stigma that seeking help will impact their careers negatively. And they're also funding a 5-year, $50 million study. But the numbers show that their efforts aren't working. So what exactly is going wrong? Here to discuss this with me is Lieutenant Colonel Samantha Nerove, a wounded warrior at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. Samantha, thanks so much for being here tonight. Now, before we get into exactly what's going wrong and the way that, that the Pentagon is treating many of these individuals, let's talk about why suicide rates are climbing so high. For example, the man who I just cited, going on his 9th tour, is that insane?
You know, of course, multiple mobilizations are going to have an impact on the lives of soldiers. And as we continue in this war, we're going to see the lives just touched, like we're seeing right now. The bigger issue, as I see it, is the stigma, the mental health stigma. Reaching out for help with a mental health issue still has a social stigma and a military stigma.
But now the Pentagon, or at least the Army, says that they're trying to change that they're trying to hire new people, institute new rules, that they're trying to spread this idea that you no longer have to have this negative stigma involved. You can go out and ask for help. Is that not really happening, though?
It is. And the Army is the Army has initiatives. The Army has many programs that we are all encouraged to participate in. But let me ask you another question, and a bigger question. What about society as a whole? Society still has a mental health stigma. So if we're looking at the military under a microscope, what about society? Because society still has that mental health stigma. So we need to look at the stigma of mental health as one enormous problem.
But how do we look at it differently, for example, from those that have not been in a war situation versus those who have, right? I mean, tell me about what it's like to have PTSD, what it's like to go for multiple tours, what it's like to see the horrors that you see in war. And, how are people, for example, journalists, how are doctors supposed to be able to relate to that? Because those are the injuries that aren't visible, right? They're not physical injuries, they're inside.
And I can speak to that because as you know, I do have PTSD. I've been mobilized 4 times, and my last mobilization I was injured again in Baghdad, and I was mobilized, I was medevaced out of Baghdad with severe PTSD, and I've been in recovery at Walter Reed. I can speak to my own pain, my own suffering. I can't speak to the Army's official policy, but I can speak to what I know and what I've experienced and what I'm still living. The most difficult thing is the difference between invisible and visible injuries. And it touches on what we're talking about today, the suicide rate. When people can't see something, they don't know how to respond, they don't know how to react, they don't know how to help, they don't know what to do. And I've lived that for the years I've been in treatment now. I can go to let me give you an example, Elena. I can go to an event, a Wounded Warrior event, a group of wounded warriors, and this happens repeatedly. Go to the event, we all enter, we walk in as a group. Sometimes we have celebrities, sometimes senior political officials, sometimes senior military officials, sometimes just local people coming out to say hello. They walk right past me to shake hands with the person who has a visible injury, maybe an amputation, maybe some other type of very visible injury.
How would you tell people to, what should they do? What can you tell people in terms of trying to understand? Because of course it's not only one thing that we have soldiers obviously committing suicide. It may be abroad, it may be here at the base, but a lot of the time it happens at home too.
The first thing I would say is the help is there and to reach out and get help. There is a stigma, but the Army is trying to limit that stigma and minimize the stigma. It's hard in the combat arms units, the units that are, like you said, the 9 mobilizations. But it can be done. People can reach out. People can get that help. Reach out, get the help. That's number one. Number two, for the people who are around people or have the opportunity to say hello, don't make assumptions that just because somebody looks fine, that they are fine. I can speak for myself. I'm far from fine. Fine is a journey. It's a path I'm on every day to get to fine.
Well, Samantha, I want to thank you very much for coming on tonight and for discussing that with us. Obviously, it's a personal issue for you, but it's something that affects thousands of individuals, especially those that are now coming home or that have been fighting in these wars for the last 10 years. So hopefully, somehow, this horrible trend will stop and people will learn, how to stop it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.